Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we continue our Da Capo Conversations, a mini-series where we'll be giving familiar segments a topical twist. Today we revisit Erika Oba's and Caleb Palka's perspectives on who or what inspires them. Here's what Erika Oba had to say.
I would say that my first major musical influence was Peter Apfelbaum, who's originally from the Bay Area and is now a New York-based artist, composer, saxophone player, multi-instrumentalist. I met him when I was 12, and he was one of my first serious music mentors. And I remember going to see a live show of his at a very, impressionable preteen age, and just being so blown away with the music that his ensemble is doing. And getting so excited and for the first time, thinking I might want to do this with my life. That feeling was great. This live music thing is amazing. And he's continued to be an influence on me. I try to listen to everything he puts out, and I've had the good fortune of getting to perform with him as an adult. He has a band that's based in New York, but sometimes comes out here and plays. And he's let me sit in on some of his gigs with his band. So in that way, I think he continues to influence me. And other musical influences, Myra, definitely. Some of her, she's coming from a more experimental tradition, which actually, Peter is too. They have some overlap in their mentorship. But when I met Myra, I hadn't done too much of the experimental improvised side of jazz. And she just opened up my world to, that whole world. And she's part of the reason why I ended up going to Mills, because I was I like what Myra's doing. And I guess some people are doing and experimenting with that, in this scene over here, and maybe I can expand what I'm doing that way. Myra's definitely musical influence. And I guess in terms of conceptually, artistically, the work of Fred Ho has had a big influence on me. And the work of, all the other artists at Asian Improv Arts, like John Jang and Francis Wong. I didn't know about them growing up, even though I grew up in the Bay Area. So I met Francis sometime in my 20s and became more familiar with his body of work and John Jang's body of work and Fred Ho's body of work, and listened to their records and read a lot of Fred Ho's writings in particular that I think had a pretty big influence on my thoughts on what am I doing here, and why am I doing this, and why do I want to do this. Those are some that I think continue to inform me. I've had the good fortune of being able to work with a lot of different types of performing artists, dancers, actors, playwrights, in addition to, all the fabulous musicians I'm surrounded by. And I feel the Bay Area has a really rich scene for people working in different cultural practices and kind of exploring how to, create new things, drawing on different traditions. And there's a couple choreographers in particular who I feel really influenced how I think about my own creative process and the kind of things I might want to make. So there's a wonderful choreographer, Samay Dizon, who is a Filipina choreographer who I've gotten to work with a couple times, and she's done some incredible, deep work, drawing on different spiritual, cultural traditions from her heritage, but kind of setting them in a modern dance context and creating kind of these new ritual spaces. And I don't know, just seeing how she worked was pretty transformative for me, and seeing the effect that deep intentional practice can have on the people she's performing with, and also the audiences, and kind of the community spaces that she's building through that work. And then another choreographer I've gotten to work with is Bib Chanel Binben, who is a Congolese choreographer, and he also, in some ways similar to Samay, drawing on some various spiritual, cultural, different traditions from his own heritage, and then kind of putting them in a more modern dance context, but still very, very different. Like only similar in that they're like kind of exploring these like some of the similar questions, but the way it manifests, they each have their own practice that is deep and involved in their own ways. But I've gotten to play with him a little bit, and yeah, it's just seeing like the communities he's building out of these things, and kind of exploring how to create something new that has deep relevance for the people who are participating in it, either as performers or audience members, was just like deeply moving to me to be able to see that. And I feel like there are other musicians and composers also exploring some of these similar threads. So that's been really stimulating and interesting for me, and something that I'm continuing to think about how to integrate into my own work.
Here's what Caleb Palka had to say.
Well, I think like probably my biggest like inspiration is nature. I love reading a lot about like, just reading a lot of nature writing, a lot of nature poets, like Mary Oliver, or like nature essayists, like Brian Doyle. There's a lot of authors who I really enjoy. I really love Ross Gay, his like writings about nature. And I think that just sort of going for a walk in nature and noticing little things often helps me get unstuck when I'm working on a piece. I think that the kind of like sense of time that I feel when I'm walking in the woods is often the kind of sense of time that I maybe want to bring the audience to in a piece. And the sense of awareness of all the sort of aliveness around me in the woods, and the kind of connection is something that the kind of connection that I think I want to kind of like cultivate in my music as well. So
yeah, there are a number of composers over the centuries who have found that to be an inspirational panacea, if you want to combine two words unusually.
Yeah.
But yeah, what about, do you enjoy reading like Thoreau and those? Emerson, or not quite back that far?
I haven't read that much Thoreau. I think primarily I read a lot of like science writers, like I'm trying to think of like Ed Yong has a book recently about like how animal senses work, or there's this book by I think Jennifer Ackerman about like owls and like sort of new science on them and stuff.
So more recent than like Jared
like
Diamond's
reading
writing.
A lot of like I guess like popular science like writing that kind of discusses things in detail that way, as well as I like the sort of more like lyrical side of like lyrical essays or poems that are like approaching nature in that different way. Yeah.
Right. Modern Walt Whitmans, as it were.
Yeah.
What about mentors?
Yeah. Well, I've been really fortunate to participate in like the Young Composers Project, as I mentioned, and also like Luna Composition Lab. It's been really amazing. Like the piece that I wrote when I was a fellow for them was also very inspired by nature, like looking at birds that I observed like in Oregon and connecting those birds to like memories of my late father who I enjoyed bird watching with, and using those bird calls as a kind of like way into the piece. So I think I've always been very inspired by nature and kind of the deeper symbolism that I can sometimes find in it as well. And yeah, it's also been really amazing going to USC and studying with all of my teachers there. I really love that we rotate from teacher to teacher each year. So I get a lot of different perspectives on things, which I really value.
That's really nice. I'm sorry about your father, though. You said your late father. Yeah. Who was your mentor at Luna?
Ellen Reed. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I really loved working with her.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure's Da Capo Conversations, and a special thank you to our guests for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at www.e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible by grants from the California Arts Council, the San Francisco Arts Commission, Grants for the Arts, and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.